Hello, everybody. Welcome to Bleus Literary Salon, the virtual edition. If you are not myself or Lauren, if you could please mute your microphones, that would be fantastic. So this is now, I guess, the third month that we're doing this every week. So thank you all so much for continuing to come out and support amazing readers and independent bookstores by purchasing these amazing readers' books and spending an hour with us every Saturday evening. I really appreciate it. I love coming to this, and I hope you all do as well. So tonight we have another incredible lineup of readers. We have Lauren Francis-Sharma, we have Mary South, we have Klein, we have Margo Orlando Littell, and we have Erica Jong. So I'm going to pass it over to Lauren to start us off. Welcome, Lauren.
Hi, thank you. So great. My novel, Book of the Little Axe, came out. Oh, hi, Jessica. Thank you. Came out on May 12th, and it's a story set partly in Trinidad and partly in North America and sort of the Montana, Idaho, what will become Montana and Idaho in the late, in the early 1800s. So I'll just begin. My protagonist is a woman named Rosa, who was born in Trinidad, now lives in Bighorn Mountain with Crow Native Americans. She's married to a Black Crow man named Edward Rose, who's a true life character. And they've had children. And Victor, her son, is 12, and he's gone on his quest, but he's failed to find his purpose. Feeling very lost, something happens on the camp, and Rosa rushes Victor away in the middle of the night, and all he knows is that they're going to meet a man. They're on a trail in the woods, and Victor is growing impatient with his mother, and this is where I'll begin. That night, as Ma slept, and Victor kept watch over Martinique, Ma's favorite mare, it felt like a circle of fire had pestled itself into Victor's chest. He thought of home, his sisters, all that he believed lost to him, and felt his thoughts like a rope, its strands swelling and tangled. Wake up, Victor. Ma was kneeling over him, shaking his shoulder. You mustn't cry in your sleep like so. She seemed sore, like she'd seen something she hadn't wished to see. Victor rubbed his eyes, startled, before realizing Ma was upset with him. And when, Ma? When can I feel what I'm feeling? Ma sat down, pulled her knees to her chest, and stared at Victor over the dying fire in a way she'd done only when she thought he did not notice. I need to get back home, he said. Your home is with me. What does that mean? The way Ma spoke was never plain, the words always masks. What do you think a mother does, Victor? What do you think I am? A mother, not a mother, your mother. Your mother who drips the world into your mouth like milk from a teat, making sure the host is healthy, making sure you don't get too much or too little. How does that host get fed, Victor? I bring her grain. I fatten her up. You want the whole world? When you see how big and ugly it is, you'll wish for me to break it into pieces and feed it to you so you don't choke on it. This is not Trinidad, he said to her. I'm not a little boy in knickers, eating tea sandwiches or whatever it is you dream about that place no one has ever heard of. Ma doused the last of the embers with water and settled back onto her mat. You're a child, she said. A child? Then it'll be a child returning home in the morning, Victor said. In the days before his disagreement with Ma, they had alighted upon the Missouri River path. Its woodlands were thick with brambles and brush and fat rattlesnakes. It had to detour, for Shields River had bloated to impassable at each end, and mud had cascaded down the sides of the Elkhorns, trapping them to the east and to the west, until rain mercifully washed away some of the sludge. All this they had managed with aplomb, and yet it was upon Victor's return to his sleeping mat after relieving himself that he stumbled, like a little boy, onto a coiling, clawing branch that held on to his flesh, gripping it as though starved. Victor, Ma called out. He bit down on the pain and assured her all was well, but Victor couldn't return to sleep, and at daybreak his leg from ankle to hip bulged with fever. He wrapped wound and wished not to have Ma mother him, prideful and too embarrassed to need her, but his fever raged. Sickness has but one intention, he heard Ma mutter. A breeze blew and it sprinkled ice onto his cheeks as Ma propped her musket against the tree trunk. She scooped up his leg and set it under her armpit. The leg was plump and shiny. What are you doing? Victor thrashed and pushed Ma back into her musket, which tipped and slithered inside a brittle clump of leaves. Ma gripped his leg again as if it was a growing threat. She choked it with her clay pot and told it to quiet down. It was early the next morning, and still Ma suctioned Victor's leg, leaving a trail of bruised ovals atop the shiny. By dusk, the shiny dulled, and Victor's head regained its weight. And when he could think clearly again, Ma shoved a cut of sheepskin into his mouth and sliced open his thigh until the blood stood raised and stiff, like tomato seeds forced to applaud her. Ma lifted his head to the pouch filled with bitter tea. Her eyes were shadowed, and she slouched like an empty, twisted sack before him. Drink up, she said. Is this your mama's tea? No, I don't have what I need here for my mother's tea. Why don't you ever talk much about your home? Because children use your words against you like tea sandwiches and knickers. Victor grinned, but he knew he'd hurt her. The way you spoke to me, I would have never spoken to my mama like that, she said. I'm sorry. Victor watched her expression, trying to discern if she was open to another question, but he could not be certain. Why did you leave home? He asked. Ma wiped the lip of the pouch with a worn hemp cloth and placed her hand across his forehead, flipping it over, hoping it seemed that at least one side of her hand would register the relief she desperately sought. I left because there could be no more dignity, and without dignity, living becomes unworthy of life. She avoided his eyes, placing the cloth back onto her waist, storing the pouch in a sack she would forget later to haul into the branches of a tree. The smoke from the fire still billowed as the sun broke through like a gorged udder. It was the fourth day of their delay. Victor had been awake for some time, watching Ma's lips move in her sleep as though she were in prayerful recitation. She woke panicked, smothered the ember chicks, checked him for fever. We may have to stay here one more night, she said. They had left to eat only a small bit of wild rice, and Ma, who never wished to be without at least one day's supply of food, was growing concerned. That morning, Victor told her she could hunt, that he would be fine, and though Ma, at first, hesitated, she decided after surveying the area that it was best to leave while the world still felt quiet beneath them. Victor slept and dreamt, awakening on occasion to slap critters, licking sweat from his locked collarbone. When Martinique first began to stir, Victor did not open his eyes, where he hardly noticed the mare's discomfort. But the old gal was persistent, and finally, when Victor sat upright, he saw that Martinique, who stood some distance from him, had pinned her ears and held her head cocked at some sound. I'm listening now, he whispered to her. Dead branches bit at the earth, their teeth clacked. Victor's bow and arrow lay in a sack upon Martinique. He wouldn't be able to reach them in time. Victor peered up into the grandfather fir overhead. Its branches were colossal spider's legs with sharp angles and plunging slopes. Climb it, he thought this as he pushed himself up from a ground, blooming cream-colored mushrooms. Martinique's ears twitched like parchment fans in the wind. Maybe Ma had changed her mind, he thought. Victor listened for the lilting rhythm of Ma's stride, upright on her toes, the walk of a farm girl who knew of the sea. But it was not Ma coming.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Wow, what vivid writing you have, and I really love that dialogue too so much. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. We really appreciate it. I'm going to paste in the chat. 1 second. Here, I'm going to paste for everybody the link to Lauren's book, Book of the Little Axe. So please follow that link and support all of these writers tonight. Thank you again, Lauren. I really appreciate that. Thank you. And now I'm going to pass it over to Mary South. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. So my book is You Will Never Be Forgotten. It is a collection of short stories that came out in March. The stories often involve characters who use technology to self-soothe or avoid negative emotions, but they also find moments of tenderness and connection as well. I'm going to read a little bit from actually the last story of the book called Not Setsuko. And it's about a mother whose daughter dies tragically and unexpectedly, and she just can't handle the grief. So she clones her and tries to remake all her memories so she can live in the illusion that she has the same daughter back, but it doesn't quite go as planned and goes to some pretty scary places fairly quickly, as you'll see. So, Not Setsuko. Unlike most mothers, I gave birth to my daughter Setsuko not once, but twice. The first was on a sunny day in the middle of summer, and she came without complications. The second was a stormy afternoon 10 years later to the date. I was induced in the same private hospital under the care of the same doctor. With the same laser-whitened smile, he had apparently delivered the babies for some of LA's most famous actresses. That time, however, Setsuko was taken out of me by emergency cesarean. She was breached, and the umbilical cord was suffocating her slowly, knotted around her neck. Ever since, I have worried about the effect this may have had upon her reborn psyche. In a few weeks, she will turn 9, the last day of her first life, and I am trying to prepare her for it. Before, she stood 4 feet 4 inches tall and registered 55 on the scale. Now she only reaches 4 feet 3 1/4 inches and weighs more than 60 pounds. This is not satisfactory. Every morning, I wake her early for a workout and take her measurements. "Rise and shine, sleepyhead," I say in my most sing-song motherly voice. She groans and burrows stubbornly under the covers, but I don't take no for an answer. Children need their parents to be authority figures and to instruct them how to stay disciplined. 62 pounds, I sigh in disappointment, recording the number. Let's get you running. I set the treadmill at a challenging incline and work her up to a healthy sweat. "Faster, Coco," I encourage over the thumping of her shoes. "No," she shouts and climbs off the machine. She retreats to a corner and hugs her legs to her chest. Her hair falls over her face. "I'm not fat." "No," sorry. "Honey," I reply, kneeling beside her. "I know that, but you don't look the way you used to look. You were so pretty and popular. Don't you want to have that again?" She raises her mournful eyes to meet mine and nods. "Then hop back up there." After the physical exercises, I put Setsuko through her mental paces. "Do you remember what you wanted to be when you grew up before you were 9 the first time?" I ask. "Did I still want to be a professional ballerina?" "Not anymore," I frown. "If you get it right, I'll let you have a treat." She scrunches her face in concentration, then brightens and pops her eyes wide open. "A vet," she cries. "I wanted to be a veterinarian." "Good," I say. "Do you remember why?" "Because of Miraku," she says. I take out a packet of mochi from the cupboard and pass her a rice bonbon filled with red bean paste. She snatches it from my fingers. Our cat, Miraku, as if on cue, jumps up on Coco's lap. "Miru," Coco squeals and covers the furry forehead with kisses. Tonight, I am going to go through with the Miraku incident. No more excuses. For what would be her final Christmas, we gifted Setsuko with a completely white kitten. She doted on the animal and rushed home from school to cuddle her and play catch the fabric mouse. Mistakenly, we let Miraku wander outside. Our house is on coastal property in Malibu, so we thought she would merely chase gulls and dig up hermit crabs by the water. When she didn't come home one night, we went scouring the beach. But living by the ocean also means that we're next to the Pacific Coast Highway, and in the morning, a neighbor brought us Miraku's slender body. The cat had been hit by a car. Setsuko cradled the kitten to her chest, the white coat matted and soiled, and cried. It broke my heart. I knelt down, enveloped them both in my arms, and cried too. I promised my Coco I would get her another kitten. Of course, I never had the chance. It's regrettable that our restagings haven't been totally consistent. For example, when Setsuko #1 was 7, we went snowboarding at Big Bear. She was having so much fun, gliding effortlessly down the slopes, until she had a bad spill and fractured her wrist. I wanted to create this event anew somehow, but my husband, Wyatt, expressly forbade it. Still, I comfort myself by recalling that I had my second Setsuko wear a cast around her undamaged arm for 6 weeks anyway. To compensate for the missing memory, I frequently have her narrate the event from start to finish and test her on the details. My hope is that if she repeats the story long enough, the fiction will become her reality. Tell me about the day at Big Bear, I say. We're overdue for a full recitation. We drove out of the city and up a mountain road. It was afternoon when we got to the lodge. We strapped into our boots and boards, and a ski instructor showed us some moves on a bunny hill. I fell over a bunch of times, but eventually figured out how to keep my balance. Fine, I say, but I want specifics. Use your 5 senses. How cold was it? What color was the snow? The snow was white like Miraku, but almost blue. It was really cold, so cold my toes went numb, and I had to go eat French fries and warm up inside. Continue, I reply. I was nervous at first, but after lunch I wasn't nervous. I wanted to try a hard trail like the older kids. I boarded a lift to a black diamond. I was doing okay, but then I hit an icy patch. I fell and landed on my wrist. I couldn't stand back up, it hurt so bad. Some nice men came and took me down the hill in a stretcher. Well done, Setsuko, I say. She flashes me a goofy smile, showing the gap between her 2 front teeth. It seems to me she always used to smile a lot more. I'll have to correct her about that later. I'm so proud of you, I'm going to let you have another mochi. She gently cups the dough and smells it in pleasure before taking a bite. You must be looking forward to your birthday, I add. You'll be allowed to eat as much candy as you want. I'm more excited for my 10th birthday, she says under her breath, but it's not lost on me. We've been restaging her parties for so many years that I will hardly know what to do when I have to organize one from scratch. Now go practice your instrument, I say. While Coco is distracted with scales on the violin, I grab Miraku, sneak out the back door, and set her in the middle of our driveway. I climb into Wyatt's convertible and slide my key into the ignition. In the rearview mirror, I watch the cat sniffing at the ground. To psych myself up and calm my shaky nerves, I rev the engine a couple of times. It's okay, I say. You're doing this for your daughter. The tires scream as I run over the animal with the sports car. I check my work. The pelvis and hind legs appear to be broken, but Miraku is alive, yowling in pain. Shit, I mutter and get back in the convertible. I want to cry, but I need to stay strong. Sometimes you have to do bad things in order to manifest good things. During the second attempt, I'm fairly confident I feel the wheels crunch the skull against concrete. I hide the body in a trash bag in the garage and wait for my husband to come home. Before the rebirth, Wyatt demanded I go into therapy. It was one of his conditions, he said. Initially, he wanted me to join him in his bereavement group, but I declined. If our baby was returning to us, there was nothing to grieve. When I began describing plans for restagings, my counselor was curious as to why I couldn't let Setsuko make new memories. Did she have kids? I asked. She didn't. Well, I explained, one of the frightening things you learn when you become a parent is that you can't protect your children from life. Anything can go wrong. They can slip on the bars of the jungle gym and get a concussion. They can die of SIDS in the night. They can be kidnapped. The only power you have is to give them the best chance possible. Could I control everything that happened to Setsuko? No, I couldn't. But since she used to be such a delightful little girl, so exuberant and charming, I was determined to provide her with the memories that made her that way. Besides, I said, it wasn't strange anymore for parents to seek a duplication. Several celebrity couples have done so, like they showed in that documentary. Why shouldn't I? That answer seemed to placate both her and my husband. What I didn't say was that I also plain miss my daughter. And whenever I see a flash of the old Setsuko in her new incarnation, I feel a surge of love in my chest. Yes, I think, this is how it is supposed to be. Here she is, my Setsuko. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary. I'm so happy that you read from that one. That's so great. Thank you. There are a lot of other amazing stories in that collection, so I'm going to share the link to make sure that everybody, sorry, I can't talk and copy and paste at the same time, everybody can get their own copy to read that and the other stories in the collection. Thank you so much, Mary. And so now I'm going to hand it over to Lee Klein. Hello, Lee. You might be on mute.
Now you hear me okay?
Yes, now. Hello.
You hear this? Yeah, hear that? That's Sun, a band that this is about. You can kind of hear what it is. It's just droning electric guitar, played by two men wearing druid costumes at extreme volume. And this book, Neutral Evil, with 3 parentheses at the end, like vibes, which is also in the band's name, Sun, is about going to see them on March 18th, 2017, a little bit after Trump's inauguration, that kind of fraught era, and going essentially by myself. It's the narrator is essentially me, eating a lot of edibles, a cookie, half of a cookie, and a blue lollipop that tasted like cinnamon, and you know, it's very strong. Oh, hello. And going to see them in a reconstituted spaghetti warehouse, which is now a music venue with about 1,200 people. So I'll just read an excerpt from it. Bass notes dropped as low as they can go, heavily distorted and sustained, each note a single steady stream, but also rough, granular, emitting sparks, like barbed wire prongs, the overall sound like an electric fence surrounding the amalgamated mayhem of history. This music isn't for everyone. It's not something you put on a party, not even at the very end of the party, unless everyone is passed out or splayed all around on the floor after you spike the punch with cyanide. It's something you listen to alone, not in your car driving down the highway, although it could work on solo night drives across Nebraska or West Texas, when the moon lights the sky and the road so straight you cut the headlights until you levitate. But in most circumstances, across most roads, it's not road trip music. It's not beach music, unless it's black volcanic beach littered with jagged shards of obsidian and everything smells like sulfur as a red tide laps at collapsing sandcastles. It's not yacht rock, unless your yacht has cannonball holes blown into its side and is sinking thanks to old-timey pirates. It's not surf music, although I suppose there's something oceanic about it, tidal, like the sound of fiendish blood-red whales swimming in circles, conspiring against harpoons, or an attempt to sonically represent, using traditional electric guitars and amplifiers, the pressure in the lowest reaches of the Marianas Trench. In short, it's a heavy sound, something for the most part listened to alone, atmospheric minimalism born from the deepest, darkest note ever played by Black Sabbath guitarist Tony Iommi, who lost his fingertips in a freak accident in his teens and had them capped with metal. For the in utero version of the little person who would ultimately be named Kali upon birth, the best baby name I came up with was Iommi. Mamu, which is the name for the wife character, mother, hard at work creating the child inside herself, at most politely considered the name I offered. But for me, the name would be a unique variation of Naomi, and unlike Ashley, Charlotte, or Sophia, every time it was uttered, it would evoke Black Sabbath. In its evocation of Iommi, tonight's headliner's sound makes sense to me with age, the way influences have been reduced and refined to an essential tone exaggerated to extraordinary extent and effect. Reduction and refinement jibe with the closing of the walls, compaction of the trash pile of life these days, employment opportunities limited to salary expectations based on years of experience, restrictions of matrimony, mortgage, and maternity, caring for a child. the constraints of responsibility and stability, grateful at this point to stand between the black carpeted walls of a reconstituted spaghetti warehouse, instead of the trash compacting walls of neediness, poverty, illness, affliction, disease, intolerance, bigotry, abuse, exploitation, injustice, bias, cruelty, brutality, ruthlessness, atrocity, murder, genocide, on and on. The stage is bathed in purple fog. The front man, from my vantage, looks like the hero of an opera delivering an impassioned soliloquy reduced to groans and growls. He looks like an ogre, elevated by expressions of human suffering. The sound keeps us all upright as it wears us down and we want to collapse. Someone has farted oh so terribly. The gas someone has passed is oh so terrible. Everyone in my vicinity covers nose and mouth. I can smell it through my eyes, my ears, my skin. I must be a suspect, unable to stand still throughout the show, wavering, bopping, shifting weight, pulling out his phone every 5 seconds to text prayers to a higher power about his critical urge to poo. The new administration recently appointed as the head of the Environmental Protection Agency someone who had campaigned on a platform that included dismantling the Environmental Protection Agency. The virulent flatulence, oh so terrible, an omen of imminent devastation. The rivers on either side of the city, on either side of Philadelphia, but also on either side of Manhattan, no longer reek. The singer raises his fist, and a few in the crowd do too. More raise their fist. The guy in front of me, he raises his fist. Are they called resist fists? The fists of the Black Olympic sprinters in Mexico City in 1968? I searched for Black runners with raised fists, a protest for human rights, not Black power, says Wikipedia. Whatever's happening in the room is the undeniable climax of the show. There's something half fascist, half leftist about it. Resist fists in the air, a demonstration against the new administration, sure, but it also seems like some of those with raised fists are brainwashed. At first, only the singer raised his fist, and then it infected others, and then it spread, but I resist the impulse to raise a fist, even if I understand it not as being brainwashed by an hour of droning, detuned, distorted guitars through a wall of sun amplifiers, not as a manly version of saying, "Uncle, I've had enough, tired of standing in the slowly evolving colored fog, listening to the sound of plate tectonics, of the leisurely settling of industrial pollution on medieval cathedrals, of the aging and weakening of everyone's bones, of inevitable cognitive and bodily decline, of time passing in a not entirely peaceful way, destroying everything in its path in the end, like slow flowing lava. I resist the impulse to raise a fist in unison with the singer and maybe 40% of the crowd, not because I see it as a symbol of unity against the forces of oppression at hand, the incursion against civil liberties that somehow won the most powerful position in the world. I resist the impulse to raise a fist in a show of resistance because I don't want symbolic or ephemeral resistance. More so, I want to resist the writing an account of this night as a form of resistance. I'm not sure how it is or if it is, but it feels like it could be, as though it all somehow is. The aesthetic independence and obvious anti-capitalist approach of the band on stage, supporting the band with cash, the venue, the promoters, everyone at work to make the show happen, the security guards whose presence dissuades the worst from occurring tonight. Who knows how many armed interlopers they fought back at the door so we can enjoy an hour of idiosyncratic audiovisual entertainment. A few days before the show, I saw a young white homeless guy sitting on an empty storefront near where I work reading Blindness by Jose Saramago. I generally ignore panhandlers in that area who set themselves out at intersections highly trafficked by tourists, intent on taking in the old colonial and revolutionary sites. But this time, passing him reading Blindness without asking for money, I've seen him around recently, always with a book and a little cardboard sign asking for cash. No sign in front of him now. I stopped, and knowing that I had spare ones on me, something I rarely have these days, I handed him $2 and said, "Great book." Blindness begins with a man in his car, suddenly afflicted by a milky white blindness. The blind man is then helped home by a Samaritan who robs him, but then soon enough the condition spreads and everyone with it is rounded up in an old hospital until everyone has it, an open symbol for a virus of the existential sort, the spiritual sort, the political sort. I don't raise my fist because I don't want to be afflicted with white blindness. I want to resist viruses of any sort. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Lee, for reading that first. I especially like being reminded of what it's like to be among so many people in a concert and feel all of that energy. And yeah, hopefully we'll be able to experience that again sometime soon. I'm going to share here the link to Lee's book. And there we go. So please, everybody, make a purchase. Thanks again, Lee. And now I'm going to pass it over to Margo Orlando Littell. Welcome, Margo.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me, Paige. Thanks everyone for listening tonight. I'm excited to read from my new novel, The Distance from 4 Points. Oh, I see one over there. That's so nice. This just came out on May 28th, so it's pretty new in the world. The Distance from 4 Points is about an affluent suburbanite named Robin, who is forced to return to her Pennsylvania hometown when she discovers that her late husband blew all their savings on decrepit rental properties there. Back in 4 Points for the first time in decades, she plans to renovate the properties as fast as she can before anyone exposes her secret past as a teenage prostitute. So tonight I'm going to read the first chapter. There was a time when, upon pulling into the glittering Steel Star office park, Robin Bescher would have wished for more flowers. Surely, she would have thought, we'd pay enough in retainer fees to warrant more beautiful surroundings. The landscaping amid all the brushed chrome and wide parking spaces was practical at best, with boxwoods under the windows and a few spindly sand cherries. These were the kinds of plants that could survive the long Pennsylvania winters, and that was reason enough, she supposed, to have them. Robin wound her ivory pashmina around her throat and ducked out of the car, keeping her face lowered against January's bitter wind. She wasn't wearing gloves. She'd lost the left hand of her favorite pair, black lambskin with a cashmere lining, and hadn't replaced it. Her nails looked terrible, rough and torn after she'd peeled the gels from her last manicure off herself. This was what she had left. She'd buried her privileged life along with Ray, the Lululemon and Pittsburgh Women's League, the monthly shipments of pricey health shake mix, her home in suburban Mount Rinda with its updated kitchen and Ethan Allen bedroom set, as out of reach now as the calloused palms of Ray's hands. She passed the office where Ray used to visit their accountant. She'd been invited to their meetings, but only as a courtesy, and she'd always had something better to do, clothes to buy for Haley, a dinner to plan, a hair appointment to keep. Now she wished she'd gone with Ray to every meeting, if only to knock him out the moment he uttered the words investment property. How had Scott Chatham, their attorney, put it to her? The rentals Ray sunk the entirety of their savings into had represented long-term plans. Buying 4 decrepit properties, 2 multifamily homes, 2 single, in a destitute former coal town was a money-making venture that Ray, a high-end contractor, had been well situated to take advantage of. He took a risk. He'd cashed out their life insurance, believing that in time he'd make it all back and more. No one could have predicted that his kayak would overturn on a day no sane person would have been out on the yacht. Scott, her friends, even her hairdresser expected Robin to be furious, but Robin couldn't explain that it wasn't just that Ray had spent the money. Despite what everyone said about marriage and partnership, it was his money, and there had never been much debate between them about that. No, the thing she could never forgive was the town. Ray had bought the properties in 4 Points, her hometown, the very place he'd plucked her out of. Now that he was dead, her name was on the deeds. She owned a piece of that place, a burden she had to carry again, 20 years after her escape. When Robin pulled open the heavy glass door that led to Scott's firm, she met a gust of hot cedar-scented air. She breathed deeply. The glowing aroma diffuser, the plush carpet, the receptionist with trendy highlights, the jades on her desk, Robin already missed them. This might be her last visit to such an expensive, luxurious office. Scott was being kind, keeping this appointment, fully aware that Robin no longer had any way of paying him. It was a familiar feeling, that dependence. Robin. Scott stepped out of his office, extended a hand to welcome her in. Good to see you. It's a cold one today. She sat on the leather chair in front of his desk, smoothed her wool slacks. She couldn't quite meet Scott's eye, her attention drifting over his shoulder to familiar surroundings. Rows of dark bookshelves, family photos in gold-plated frames, thick hunter green draperies over standard issue corporate windows. She'd seen them countless times before, but they'd never seemed so aggressively showy. The orchid bloomed again, she observed, gesturing to a hot pink flower in a porcelain pot. She'd given it to Scott as a thank you last year for trying to pull strings with her mortgage lender. She should have saved the $50. Scott considered the orchid politely, then cleared his throat. So, Robin. He peered at her, gauging whether she'd make a scene as she had many times before. Of course, Robin no longer sobbed through the meetings. Whatever humiliations she'd endured in this office, the piecing away of the life that had buffered her from all her former desperation, they had all led up to this, the final indignity. Call the bank again, she said. Ask for more time. Scotch-faced, twitched with pity. They gave more time. They lowered your rate. You still can't pay the mortgage. I can try. Scott sat back. Robin, we both know there's no job you can get that'll keep you in that house. Oh, but she had tried. She'd lasted 2 weeks behind the register at Giant Eagle. The manager felt bad when he fired her, but Robin couldn't stop herself from crying through every shift. Then she'd gotten a waitressing job at an Olive Garden, but she was decades older than the other servers and couldn't keep up with the dinner rush like she could when she was young and starving. She didn't bother to wait to be fired. She wanted to be the kind of woman who'd hustle when shit hit the fan, but she wasn't. Not when the odds were so clearly stacked against her. The house is lost already, Scott said. A single file folder sat on the desk between them. He passed it from one hand to the other, then planted his palm on top. There are no saleable assets, he said. We need to figure out where you're going to go. I'll find an apartment, something close by so Haley can stay at Our Lady. She's 13. I won't make her change schools halfway through the year. I have to get going, Scott. School lets out soon. She gripped her handbag and stood. Sit down. Scott's desk phone trilled. He glanced at it, discreetly pressed a button to silence the ringing. He flipped open the folder and nudged it toward her. Inside were spreadsheets, pages of them. They'd gone over spreadsheets countless times, but always on the computer that sat off to the side, him counseling and her adjusting. Now, in hard copy, they were reality. Nothing left to change. When Scott spoke, his voice was even. He delivered hard truths every day. I'm going to be blunt. You can't afford to stay in Mount Rinda. Do you understand what I'm saying? I don't understand any of this. You have to leave. Absolutely not. The 4 Points properties are all you have left, Robin. You told me I can't sell them the condition they're in. You can't sell them, but you can live in one of them for free, and they're a way to make a living. Stay with me, Robin. He flipped to the next sheet. Right now you've got tenants in 5 units. You'll live in one empty property and fix up the worst off apartment. On the sheet, Robin could see that he expected her to have a tenant by March. Just over a month to fix up a place in God only knew what condition. Well, Robin could imagine. She'd lived in places like that, and she knew nothing about how to make them fit for occupancy. Her eyes returned to the cells detailing the first empty unit, the place where she was supposed to live. You're saying the only place I can go is 4 Points? You need to get the rents from Ray's properties. In the meantime, it's a roof over your head, and Haley's. The mention of Haley was supposed to make her feel guilty, and it did. But there was more at stake, and living in 4 Points could only do Haley harm. You can be happy, Robin. Make a new life. Not in 4 Points. Scott raised his eyebrows. Robin didn't know if it was possible for Scott or anyone else to look into her past life, but she'd never been willing to take the risk. Even directly acknowledging her feelings about 4 Points felt dangerous. A lot of worse off places in southwestern PA, Scott said. I grew up there. I made a lot of mistakes. We all did. Hell, we were young. Whatever mistakes Scott had made in his life were nothing close to the things she'd done. She almost wanted to tell him the truth, show him exactly why he had to find another place, another way for her to live. Scott straightened the papers in front of him. Well, I don't know what else to tell you. Haley needs to be your first priority. That's exactly why I can't go back. Scott was trying to help, trying to be a friend to her the way he'd been to Ray, but he didn't know her. No one in Mount Rinda did. He couldn't possibly understand that a choice between 4 Points and starving wasn't so easy to make. If she didn't have Haley, there'd be no question she'd starve. Scott flipped the last spreadsheet over. On the back, he'd written a name, Tom Frost, and a telephone number. Friend of Ray's, another landlord. He'll be happy to get you set up. Robin had the distinct feeling that she was being passed to someone else. She supposed that Scott felt he had taken over for Ray in some unspoken chain of custody. Her whole adult life had been this way. Before Ray, there had been, well, but that was before. I'm going to make it right, she said. I know you don't believe me. I'll go if I have to, but I'll be back in Mount Rinda by spring. Thanks. We'll leave Robin there for tonight. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, Margo. You set us all up so perfectly to continue reading. Thank you. Margo has shared a link from a great bookstore in New Orleans, which I am going to link to here. So please support that bookstore for Margo's book. Thank you again, Margo. And now I'm going to pass it over to our fifth reader, Erica Jong. Welcome, Erica.
Thank you. I'm
Hello.
going to read a poem from my latest book of poems, The World Began with Yes. It's called Child on the Beach. The Mediterranean is black with bodies, as in the time of the Trojan War, when Homer sang of bloody battles and heroes lay unburied beneath the topless towers of Troy. But this little boy of 3 sleeps unburied on a beach. Where's he from? The chemical fog of Syria, the garbage dumps of beautiful Beirut, the chaos of civilization come undone. He rests, his parents lost, his sisters drowned, his brother thrown up on another beach. What shall I do with this dead toddler who breaks me open to grief? I will adopt him, my nameless grandson, welcome him into my shattered breast. His death so sweet, even cherubs weep, and nereids float him in their seaweed boats. Little one, now you are mine. Sleep in my arms while I sing you this lullaby. Maybe you'll awaken in a kinder world where children don't die at the edge of the sea. Meanwhile, dream of peace for this broken world. Thank you so much. Such a pleasure to read with all of you.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you so much for reading that. Wow. I think that's something we can all remember really vividly.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. I'm going to share the link here to Erica's book of poetry, The World Began with Yes. I've just posted it into the chat here. So thank you, Erica.
Thank you so much.
So that concludes tonight's virtual edition of Les Bleus Literary Salon. Thank you all for calling in and joining us. A huge thanks to all of the readers, Lauren Francis-Sharma, Mary South, Lee Klein, Margo Orlando Littell, and Erica Jong. We'll see you again next Saturday, and I hope you can all join next week and have a wonderful week. Thank you all so much again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paige.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.